the idea of waking up in the middle of the night to, do your business and you're half out of it, and you're stumbling around, and all of a sudden you're standing there face to face with something that isn't human. It's not supposed to exist, but it's standing there in front of you. Like, I don't know, I would completely freak out.
A teenage boy and a non-human entity have a chance meeting and spook each other. It was October 25th, 1979, Steinbach, Manitoba. 15-year-old Dan Clary, a pseudonym, had gotten out of bed at around midnight. Everyone in the home was fast asleep, but Clary had awoken with the urge to relieve his bladder. He made his way to the top of the stairwell and turned left to go down the steps, when he received the surprise of his life. Standing on the stairs was something not human. We startled each other, Clary recalled in his report to the Mutual UFO Network. He was halfway down the steps, which made him quite tall. Clary and the entity stared at each other for what to him felt like a full minute. Clary eventually, quote, unfroze, took a step back, and took off running back to his bedroom. He slammed the door. His urge to relieve himself was still there, and so he ended up going out his bedroom window. The old farmhouses had 3 round holes in the bottom of the windows, which let air in the room if you needed it. I urinated through that hole, down the side of the house, and then jumped under the covers and hid there until morning. The next morning, Clary heard his grandmother cooking eggs downstairs. He immediately ran down to ask if the dogs were inside that evening. She told him that they had been left outside all night. Clary knew that the thing he saw on the stairs was no dog, but he did wonder why they didn't bark and alert him and the others that an intruder had gotten into the house, unless, of course, the intruder he saw didn't get in via the usual avenues, back door, basement window, etc. Ultimately, Clary never said a word to his grandmother or anyone else in his family about the strange incident, as he feared they might think he was crazy, or making up stories for attention. Clary indicated that the creature he saw resembled the large black-eyed, gray-type beings so prominent in popular culture. The one aspect of the encounter that haunted him the most, he noted, was the sight of the, quote, reflecting eyes staring at me. He just could not get that image out of his mind, and he still thought of it many times over the years. While Clary did not indicate any missing time, nor does he report anything else amiss happening that evening, he did have something happen a few years later that caused him to rethink the encounter. He wondered if indeed something else had occurred that he could not consciously recall. What's really weird is, years later, I had an x-ray done on my head for an unrelated incident, and the doctor asked me in a really weird way if I was ever shot in the head. I don't know, but it just came to me that what they saw in the x-ray was related to, maybe, what I had seen on the steps that night. A foreign object about the size of a grain of white rice had been seen on the x-ray. Clary indicated that he had no idea what it could be or how it got there. He left the doctor's office without saying a word. Sadly, it remains unclear what, if anything, happened with regards to his case in the Mutual UFO Network. A couple are run out of camp just days before Halloween by some strange objects. It was October 28, 1974, Monticello, Utah. In the days leading up to Halloween, Lisa and Dan Holt, both pseudonyms, had found that they had some downtime and decided to get away for a few days. They arrived and set up camp about a mile down from the rim of the canyon, a very remote area near the Four Corners. They just got a fire going and had just started to make dinner when Dan noticed 5 luminous spheres that appeared to be floating just below the ridge. He pointed them out to his wife as he grabbed his binoculars. I told her it looked like someone was spotlight hunting. Dan looked at them with his binoculars. The objects did something he wasn't expecting. 2 of these lights slowly moved above us, and the other 3 slowly began to float towards us just above the juniper pinyon trees. I could see that there was no vehicle, just these luminous spheres moving towards us. The realization of what was going on suddenly hit the couple, and they immediately raced for their vehicle. As fast as we could get in the truck, we did, leaving all our gear there. Dan recalled that there was only one small rocky trail that led into and out of the spot, and so they had no choice but to take it. As they pulled away, Dan and Lisa could see that the objects had reached the campsite and were now hovering directly over it. When we reached the top of the canyon, we saw several objects that appeared to vibrate rapidly and moved horizontally. They appeared to have 2 sections. The bottom was green, the top was red, and it had a white tube-like section that hung from the bottom, like a vacuum hose. For some reason, I had the feeling that it was sucking up something. While they had initially observed 5 of them, they were shocked to see that the sky was suddenly filled with them. Over the ensuing 5 miles of trail, Dan claims that they observed approximately 50 of these objects moving above them. We came to a building that looked to be used only seasonally for cattle or the beanfield workers, and pulled up to see if anyone was there. I honked my horn and was starting to open my door when the windows of the building began to glow. We took off again for the paved road, not stopping to see if there was anyone at a couple of other ranch houses we saw on the way in. As they approached the paved road, the couple could see a glowing red spherical object just off the side of the road. Dan passed it and came to a stop about 40 feet from it, easing his car off the road. I got my binoculars out and told my wife to shine the spotlight on it. When the light hit the object, it sort of exploded, and the main piece flew past my window. My wife yelled that something was coming over the hill behind us, to get moving. I looked in my rearview mirror to see a large luminous object directly behind us. Very soon we knew it was far too bright to be auto lights. As I turned around and put the truck in gear, my wife started to scream as we took off. I looked in the rearview mirror to see a round, very bright object, approximately 30 feet in diameter, above and behind us. Dan claims that he took off, going as fast as he could. It was 10 miles to the highway between Monticello and Cortez, and another 10 miles to the highway patrol station outside of Monticello. For the next 10 miles it would drop back and then instantly be right behind us several times. I was going 80 to 90 miles per hour down this narrow country road. The object stayed with us until we were close to the highway patrol truck station outside of town. I skidded to a stop in front of the station and ran inside to tell them what had happened. They told the couple that they were having a hard time believing their story, though they did admit that just a couple of weeks earlier, a trucker had come through with a similar story. He had insisted that a, quote, helicopter was harassing him. When he slowed down to stop, the object came alongside of the man's truck, then disappeared. They had decided that it must have been a helicopter, possibly with a flamethrower of some type, because the paint was burned on the truck trailer, and the trucker opened his window to look and had received minor burns and hair burned off. Dan offered to take any test they wanted to prove that he was not under the influence, but they declined. I asked them to go with us to see for themselves, and because we had left all our gear where we were camped. They called the sheriff department, and the sheriff, highway patrol, and my wife and I, in our truck, headed back there. As you might expect, there was nothing there. Not one light, nothing out of the ordinary. What could I say? I asked them to stay up on the rim of the canyon long enough for me to retrieve my gear. As we were throwing it into the truck, we could see them leaving. We drove up and out of the canyon and decided to find somewhere near the highway patrol station to get some sleep. The couple planned to drive the 350 miles home the next day. They had no intention of staying there any longer than they had to. And this is where the story takes an even stranger turn. The next day, around 10 a.m., we awoke sitting up in the front of my truck, at the rim of the canyon where we first saw the lights, about 1 mile from where we left our gear the night before. Neither of us remembered driving back to the spot. My wife asked if I remembered telling her to wake up and look at the doe that was looking at us through the windshield. Dan did eventually recall waking up at some point in the night and seeing a, quote, big-eyed deer that was looking in the windows of the truck at them, though he did not recall telling his wife to wake up to look at it. Aside from this one moment, everything else about that night after arriving at the patrol station to sleep is a blank, and so is how they ended up back at the canyon, the very last place they would have gone on their own. For 2 years, Dan and his brother returned to the area several times, and did indeed see the lights again, though nothing so dramatic played out. Eventually the lights stopped showing themselves altogether, and Dan and his brother stopped going to the spot.
It sounds like an entire fleet of objects just suddenly showed up, and they were following this couple. And there was one part of the story that I found really interesting, was when they said that they pulled up to that house, that little shack or whatever, and then he got out of the car to go inside of it, or to knock on the door to see if there was anyone inside of it, and all of a sudden the windows and everything turned red. From it looked like it was illuminated from the inside. And if you look into the Rendlesham Forest case, and I know a lot of people have debunked it, there is a part of the story where the soldiers were going through the forest and they came across this farmhouse, and they said all of a sudden the interior of the farmhouse lit up like a red color. And that's what happened here, and I just thought it was a really interesting detail. They said that they saw the police cruisers leaving the area, and then they took off and went to this patrol station to sleep for the night. I wonder if they actually did leave. I wonder if that's just a screen memory of some type. I just wonder if it just seems odd that the beings would bring them in their vehicle back to the area. It's more likely they never left the area.